here. Come in. Tell me where you're from. I'm going to close this door. It's a little loud. Come on in, guys. Let me know if you can hear me. I'm losing my voice just a bit, so I'm hoping we make it through tonight. Come on in. Come on in. Hey, Amanda. Hey, Amy. Hey, Becca. Hey, Lisa. Hey, Nancy. Hey, Lori. Hello, hello. I'm so glad you're all here. I'm so excited. We're going to be talking about nonfiction decodables. Hey, Stephanie. We're going to talk about fiction decodables too. We're just going to talk about how we can best scaffold our decodables when we are in small group. If you're just coming in, I'm starting to lose my voice. I've got a sore throat and a little bit of a cold. So thank you for being here. So many, I see two different Amy's, and you both spell your name the same way that I do. Awesome. Hey, Marnie. Hey, Macy. Hey, Marcy. Hey, Michelle. I am so glad that you guys are here. I'm pulling up the chat, and we are going to get started here in just a few minutes. Feel free to chat with each other in the chat. Ask questions if you have questions as we go along. And I'm excited. So as we're waiting for people to come in, I see there's still a lot of people in the waiting room trying to come in. So as we are trying to get everybody in, I would like for you to just drop one thing you're hoping to learn tonight when it comes to decodables. Hey, Christy. Hey, Leslie. Come on in, guys. One thing as you're coming in, tell me your name, where you're from, and one thing you're hoping to learn. We've got a little bit of a lag here in the waiting room, so I'm just giving people a chance to hop in. Hey, Jody. Leslie says Tier 1 decodable differentiation. Excellent. Excellent. Come on in. Looks like we have about 30 people left just trying to get in. Sometimes when everyone logs on at the same time, it just bogs it down. So come on in. Hey, Jody. Hey, Sarah. Hey, guys, come on in. It's just slow moving. It'll just take a few minutes, I think, for everyone to get in. Hey, Lisa. Yeah, helping kids retain skills that they've learned. That's always so hard because, if we have with our decodables, we want to make sure that we are making sure that we're pulling in those previously taught skills as well. So that's great. Yeah, we're going to talk about that tonight too. Lori says how to administration to understand how valuable decodable texts are for beginning readers. Yes, we're going to talk about that tonight as well. Hey, Brenda. Laura says pacing and progression, and we're going to talk about that as well. All right, I think we are getting to, I think everybody is getting in now. I'm going to pull up my slides. All right, let's see, Helen's coming in. Okay. Hey, everybody that's just coming in, if you just want to tell me, I think we finally got the waiting room kind of cleared out a little bit. So if you're just coming in, tell us where you are from, and also let us know one thing that you're hoping to learn tonight. I'm going to go ahead and pull up my presentation. this down. Hey guys, I'm so glad you're here. Yes, so somebody says they want to know how to help parents understand why and how to use decodables. We will talk about that tonight as well. I'm excited to talk about that. Okay, I think everybody's in. I'm going to pull up my screen and we're going to get started. I'm so excited. If you're just coming in, I am struggling a little bit with my voice tonight. So I'm going to do the very best that I can. And we're going to make it through. I feel it. All right. Okay, so we're going to talk about using decodable text effectively. And one thing that we have to keep in mind is that when we are planning and we're thinking about our instruction, I think it's so easy for us to be able to, oh, thank you, Christy. It's so, it's easy for us to do the things like cumulative review, and it's easy for us to know how to pull that in when we're looking at our scope and sequence. It's easy for us to do word chaining and word mapping and those kind of things. But where I find that we struggle is that when we start to pull in that application piece. And I think part of the problem with pulling in this application piece is that we often have programs that are phonics based. And so we just don't really have great decodables that align with our scope and sequence. And sometimes that can feel really hard. That's one thing that we struggle with. And we also struggle with, I know I struggle with in the primary grades, really saying that, like, you know, I have these books behind me and they're great. These are decodable books. These are my nonfiction decodable books that we use. But the problem that I run into in kindergarten is sometimes kids aren't ready. Sometimes you hand them a book and it's a really big struggle for them. And so what do we do then, right? How do we best support them if they're not ready to take on a passage and they're not ready to take on a book? What do we do and how do we best support them? So that's another thing that we often struggle with when we're thinking about decodable text. And so if you're just coming in, I see more people are kind of coming in. The waiting room's lagging a little bit. So how do we support our kids? And how do we ensure that we are following that scope and sequence and choosing texts that align? So that's hopefully what we're going to talk about. I'm going to share with you tonight, and I'm going to leave time for questions at the end as well. So for those of you who don't know who I am, I'm hoping that I think everybody, I recognize a lot of names. If this is your first ever webinar, my name is Amy Burkholder, and I am a K-5 literacy coach. I am a literacy consultant and PD specialist. I present at conferences, I present in schools, I present in districts, and that's like one of my favorite things to do. And so when I became a literacy coach, I wasn't sure that I would love adults. I was asked to take a literacy coaching position, and I was like, no way, I love kids. I want to work with kids. But working with adults is actually a true passion of mine. And so I love that I get to do that everywhere. I'm Orton Gillingham certified, I'm Letter certified. I'm the owner here at Literacy Adventures that really just started as a place to be able to support teachers. Every resource that I have ever made, I made for my own teachers because we had a need and we had gaps in our curriculum. And so what happened is that curriculum just kind of grew and grew, and we actually just got it approved in the state of Virginia to continue using. So we're super excited about that. I'm the co-owner of Unlocking SOAR. I share that virtual conference with Christina Winter and Savannah Campbell, and we have a virtual conference 3 times a year. And I just submitted the final portion of my book that's coming out in June. And it's called Literacy Unlocked: How to Implement the Science of Reading with Young Learners. And so it takes you through very early stages and how we can best support our K-2 students. So that's just a little bit about me if you don't know me. I also, like I said, I have a state-approved SOAR curriculum, and it's pending in 4 other states, and I'm really excited about that. And I also have a Route to Reading membership that where we just have all of my resources, everything I've ever created is inside that membership. We have member exclusives, we have monthly coaching calls, we just unlocked one-on-one coaching for our our members, so our members can log on and have one-on-one coaching calls with me, and then we have office hours. Just everything I've ever created is in that membership, and I've put so much into it. Okay, let's start talking about decodable text. Oh, thank you, Michelle. I'm so glad. So glad. Okay, I see some questions coming through, and I'm going to look at these because I want to be able to come back and answer these. Patty says she wants to blend Dibbles testing, very non-decodable with instruction using decodable. So Patty's, we're going to talk about that a little bit tonight too. Okay, so our driving questions tonight are, thank you, Diana. What are our driving questions? What are decodables? Why are they important? What are the components of a decodable text? How do we use decodable text effectively? And what are some challenges and solutions? Oh, thank you. I'm so glad you love Route to Reading, you guys. I love, it's such a special place. So if you are having these questions, and the questions that you have in the chat also are questions that we get all the time, right? You are not alone. These are questions that we're all just trying to figure out. And it's because we've made this shift. I just want you to, in the chat, just kind of give like a little hand raise or an emoji if making that shift from level text in your classroom to decodables was a little bit hard for you. And I just want people to know they're not alone. It was hard for me because I honestly didn't know. I didn't know. It was all that I knew were those level texts. And so making that shift was hard for me, not because I didn't want to make it, not because I didn't want to make the change, but because I wanted I wanted to do what was best for kids, but it was all that I knew. And so if you feel that way, please just let people know in the chat that they're not alone, that this is new for them as for you as well. All right, so what are decodable texts? A decodable texts are texts that are carefully chosen and controlled by the phonics skills that have previously been taught on a scope and sequence. So as your students progress and their phonics skills grow, these texts grow with them. So for example, if I am teaching short O, for example, I want to make sure that when I am reading with my students in that application piece, that I am making sure that I am showing them how to apply those short vowel skills. So if I'm teaching short O, I've taught them how to map CVC words with short O. I've taught them, we've done some word chaining. I've taught them how to make those connections. And now I want to take that decodable text and show them how to apply it, because our ultimate goal is to have successful readers and writers. And so when I am doing that, I want to make sure that that text is very controlled, because I want them to practice the skills I've been teaching them in context. So what they are not permanent, they are not a quick fix, and they're not random. And so what I mean by this is when I say they're not permanent, I like to think of decodable text as training wheels. And I get this question all the time. Give me a thumbs up in the chat if you are always wondering, when do I start to release my students from decodable texts and move them into more authentic texts? If that is a question that you have tonight, let me know, because yeah, I get this question all the time. And we have something called a book graduation, if you will, towards the end of first grade for some of our kids. And it's the coolest thing to see when we let them know that they're ready to start reading some more authentic texts, and they get really excited about it. And we can talk a little bit about that tonight too. And so when we think about that, we have to think about what skills do they know, and what skills are we seeing in this grade level text that they have to be able to have in order to be able to decode. And so we have to think about that. So they're not random. When I first started teaching first grade, I would pull a book, a level text off the shelf, and I would say, you know what? This has a lot of AI and AY words in it. So I think that that's the phonics skill that I'm going to teach. Well, now we know, and research tells us it has to be more systematic than that. So we have to ensure that whatever text we're pulling aligns with whatever phonics skill we're teaching, and also is building in that cumulative review piece so that we're constantly reviewing those previously taught skills. And decodable texts aren't a quick fix. So we can't assume that we will read a couple decodable texts and our kids will be readers and they'll be ready to move into authentic text. It's a process, but it's not a permanent. It's just it's kind of where we have to sit with our kids. I always talk about, if you hear and if you've been to any of my phonics webinars, where I'm always talking about that slow and awkward phase of reading, that decoding as they begin decoding. That's kind of where we have to sit with our kids until they become fluent, because that's what they need, right? They need that extra practice. So some key characteristics of decodables are the phonics alignment piece. This is the most important thing when we're thinking about decodables. The words in our decodable text should align to specific phonics skills being taught in our structured literacy program. I want to know too in the chat, if you'll just tell me how many of you have true decodable texts that align with your phonics scope and sequence. So you can give me a thumbs up if you do and a thumbs down if you do not. Becca says yes, yes, yes. Awesome. Okay, I see lots of yeses. I see some no's. And so if you don't and you need help, if you reach out to me, I will look at your scope and sequence. I just had to really go through that process in our district and find texts that aligned with our scope and sequence, or at least closely aligned. And so I'm familiar with a lot of them. So if you need help, just send me an email and we can look at your scope and sequence and I can maybe point you in the right direction. But it's really important that we are making sure that it does have that phonics alignment piece, because if not, then reading that text is for nothing. If we've been putting all that work in to our phonics lessons, we want to allow them to apply that. It has to have controlled vocabulary. So I am a firm believer that it's okay to have a couple vocabulary words in our texts. And I'm going to share with you my nonfiction decodables tonight too, because those kind of were created because I had a group of second grade boys and I was reading with them and they were like literally laying their heads on the table. And I was like, what is going on, guys? Like, what's the problem? And they're like, we just want to read about real stuff. We don't want to read about, Pam and Sam sat on the mat, right? They want to read about real things. So that's kind of how these decodables came to be. They wanted to read about real things. Well, in order for them to read about real things, I had to put some vocabulary in there. And so I'm a firm believer in we can add vocabulary. It just needs to be a little bit controlled. So when we created those texts, what we tried to do is we tried to choose 3 to 4 vocabulary words that would be easy to pre-teach so that they could have access to those as they were working through their decodable text. And so that's something else that's important to keep in mind. Okay, they have to have a sequential progression. So decodable texts are often organized in this sequence. So it's gradually introducing new phonics skills while reinforcing those previously taught ones. And this progression supports a systematic approach. And that's really what we want. That's what research tells us. Decodable texts support decoding skills. So they help students practice all of those skills that they've been applying, but they're helping them apply them in context. So as they encounter words that follow that phonics skill they've learned, that reinforces their understanding and the application of those rules that we've been teaching, but it also makes them feel so successful. They truly feel like they are readers because they are now practicing what they've been working so hard on. Decodable texts reinforce phonemic awareness. They support that development, and it highlights the relationship between sounds and letters, and it aids in that recognition of decoding, and it helps them become faster, right? Because the more they read, the better they become. So we talked about how decodables aren't permanent, and they are not permanent. So who needs these decodable texts? We've been spending a lot of time in the Route to Reading membership, this mid-year data with one-on-one coaching calls, and we've been looking at data, and we're deciding now, especially in first grade, who really still needs those decodable texts, right? What does that look like? How do we figure that out? Because decodables are stepping stones, right? So students who have had letter sound instruction and they've had a lot of time to build that automaticity with those sounds as well as practice that decoding are ready to use decodable text. So we want to ensure that we're not stopping them. I recently, I don't know if you guys have followed on my stories, but these books that were created, I'm going to give you guys a set of these tonight because I love them and my kids love them, and I want you guys to have a set of them as well. So these that were created, we also had kiddos in kindergarten who were seeing their friends and they were reading these books and they really wanted to read books. And so we knew that they weren't ready for books quite yet. And so what we did is we just took popular topics, like this one is on bears, and we added some things that they're able to do. So we added the sounds. And so they're not ready for sentences yet, but we created some successive blending. So this one's about bears. Where do bears live? In the den. Den. And then when they turn the page, because we don't want them using that picture support, once they turn the page, that picture of a den is there. So you're building in that vocabulary piece, and they're able to read that word one more time. And then they go on to the next word. And so it was just a way to just make them feel successful because it's a stepping stone, but it's also kids start to recognize when other kids are able to read. And it's very upsetting if they feel like they are behind. So it's all about finding that scaffold for those who need it as well. So Wiley Blevins says that it is the application where those skills stick. So we have to make sure that we're allowing our students to immediately apply their knowledge in context. All right, so what are some effective routines for decodable text? So when we're thinking about our decodable text, I'm going to go through a text first, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to show you some ways that we can scaffold for our lowest readers. So when we're thinking about decodable text, we want to think about three main things. We want to think about that warm-up piece. What are they doing? How are we getting them warmed up? That could be something as simple as the word chaining activity you're doing right before you start. We have blending lines in our decodable text. I don't know if you guys can see these, but it's just a quick little warm up. And that's kind of where we start. We're like, okay, boys and girls, we've been reading these words, and now we're going to do a blending line that focuses on this skill. And then what we're going to do is we're going to talk about whatever that text is. So we might have a few pre-reading questions. So this book, I keep referring to it because it's laying here on my desk. I might ask them, it's called The Vet. So I might say, have you ever been to the vet, right? How are vets like doctors? And we're going to have conversations about that with them. Would you describe a vet as helpful? Why or why not? And so we're giving them some time to practice, maybe see some of the words that they're going to see in the text. We're giving them some of that, we're pulling in that background knowledge for them. And then we might introduce any of that controlled vocabulary as well. Then we want to give them time in text. This is time for them to read and practice. And this is time for us to listen in. I'll share a little bit about stagger reading and what that looks like so that all kids are reading at a different time, but we're able as teachers to lean in and listen. And then we want to follow up and we want to do an extension. And I think sometimes when we think about reading, the thing that we often forget is that we can have students read texts more than once. Next month, I'm going to be doing a small group instruction webinar. It's going to be free, and we're going to talk about what that looks like. So just because we read a book on Thursday doesn't mean we have to have a brand new decodable text for them to read on Friday. We can send it home. They can read it multiple times during the week, and they can read it multiple times with us. They can do things like choral reading, echo reading, partner reading. Those are all things that are great to help build fluency for our students. So if you take this, for example, this is what I might share with students in the whole group part of my lesson. I might pull this up if we're working on EA. I might talk about the beach. You'll see here that we have those pre-selected vocabulary words. And then I might just have them go through and say, okay, boys and girls, can we highlight some of these vocabulary words? We also have vocabulary cards where it has like the picture of like a sandcastle. So it's the word sandcastle, the picture of a sandcastle, and then a short teacher definition. And so we'll explain what those are. We might have them find those vocabulary words in the text. We might also use another color and have them highlight all the EE and EA words that we have been working on. And so if we think about that, and we've pre-taught those vocabulary words, and we've kind of shown them the text for the first time, maybe we choral read the text, maybe we didn't, right? It just depends on your group. Then we want to think about that warm-up piece. And so like I shared with you, we like to do that phoneme grapheme practice. We might introduce some high frequency words for our kiddos, whatever high frequency words they might see in there. And we might introduce that new vocabulary. So you can see here with one of these decodables, this is the teacher's guide. And so this is what I give my teachers, and they have their learning objectives. They have the phonics skills that they are working on. So you can see right here, this says all skills. And that's because these are the set 8, or these are the books that are just about that point where we're going to start introducing kids to authentic text. So if your kids can successfully read 2-syllable words, 3-syllable words, compound words, if they're able to really start to understand that if you can read cat and nip, you can read catnip, right? If you can read male and man, you can read male man. And so when they're able to kind of start putting that together, they're able to really look at inflectional endings and understand what that means, adding that ing at the end, adding that er at the end, adding that ed at the end of a word, really understanding that. And then once they're through vowel teams, they are able to really kind of start taking off with some authentic text. And so what we try to do, I'm not sure how many of you are following our scope and sequence, but with our scope and sequence, we start introducing morphology very early on. So kindergartners can tell me the difference between a cat and cats, right? And they can easily read that. We're either going to add an S or we're going to add an ES to make it more than one. We go ahead and we pull in ing. We go ahead and we pull in er and ed, because those are words that our kids see frequently in text, and we want to front load that. There's no reason to wait until the end of your scope and sequence to introduce those. Okay, I got off on a little tear, but what you see here are those decodable words and phrases. And so what we try to do is we try to create blending lines for our kids that have the words they're going to see. So they're going to have a couple decodable words, and then they're going to have a couple phrases that lend themselves to the text that they're reading. Then we might introduce that vocabulary. You can see we have the vocabulary here. We might talk about that. We're going to show them that picture card of that mailbox. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what letters are. Believe it or not, a lot of kids probably don't know what letters are, right? I don't know how, if I'm dating myself, but like we used to have pen pals when I was in school, and we would write letters to them. And I just feel like that's kind of something, a lost art, if you will. So we're going to talk about what that is, right? And then we're going to have some pre-reading questions for them. So we might ask them those questions to kind of build that background knowledge before they start reading. And then when they start reading, I want to note how important it is to give immediate feedback. Now, I understand that when I have a small group, we just regrouped our groups. I have a group of 4, which is beautiful. Like I can get so much done with them. But then I also have a group of 6, which is a lot. And even sometimes I've had groups of 7. And so it's hard to hear every single child reading. So when they start reading, what I like to do is I have the books here. And if they I have books, and then I might have a word list that follows. So this is, let's just go with the AI. And so they might have just a list of words, and they're working on reading those. They know when I hand them their text, it's their turn to start reading. So it goes like this. I'll hand the student, like to my right, a book. I'll skip the person beside them. I'll hand the next student a book. I'll skip the person beside them. I'll hand the next student a book. And by the time I go around the table, I can come back to the people that I didn't hand books to and hand them their book. And so they're stagger reading and they're whisper reading, and they're all starting at different points so that they're not hearing each other, unless that's my purpose, is for them to choral read together or partner read. It just kind of splits it up a little bit, and then that allows me to listen in as they're reading. So one thing here, we created these, I call these the new age cueing strategies, because we know 3 cueing does not work, right? But I love giving these decoding strips to my students. And so we remind them before they start reading. When I get stuck on a word, I want to break the word apart, sound it out, blend it back together, read the whole word. And then you can decide, does it make sense? Is that a word that I know? But that shouldn't be the first thing that we go to. We shouldn't immediately go to the picture to find meaning. We want our kids to be able to attack words. And so giving them this decodable strip and kind of laying it at the top. These are also with the nonfiction text, laying it at the top for them so that they have that reminder is good. And so we tell if our students struggle, so let's say we're stagger reading and we're going to lean in. If I have that group of 7, I'm going to pick maybe 2 kids to lean in and listen to for that day. And then maybe the next day I'll choose 2 more to listen to. My group of 4, I can kind of listen in as they're reading and kind of give them immediate feedback. So if they miss a word, I'm going to ask them to point. I'm going to point to that word and that they said incorrectly. And I'm going to say the spelling and the sound of the word. And then I'm going to ask the student to repeat it. And then I'll say, blend the word faster, remind them to go back and reread the sentence correctly. So if the sentence were, the vet has a top job, and the student read the word top as tip, I would point to that word and I would say, this word is top, T-O-P. Let's sound it out. T-A-P, top. Can you say that word? T-A-P. Top. And then I'm going to say, great, go back to the beginning and let's read that word again. So I want them to read the whole sentence again, because that's going to help with meaning, and that's going to help make sure that they are concentrating on what it is they're reading. Okay, time and text. So now we have spent some time, talking about how we're going to set them up for success as readers. And so now that they have read the book once, we might want to have them read it again, right? This time we might have them locate the vocabulary. I love things like witch fingers, right? I love having them use witch fingers. I love having them use chips. I love wands. Anything that just makes it exciting for them, makes it engaging for them. And so I will have them maybe go through and locate some of that vocabulary. I'll pull up that vocabulary card of a mailbox and I'll say, can you find the word mailbox, right? Can you find where they're mailing a letter? And we're going to talk about that. I might have them identify some phonics skills. I might, for their second read, have them go through. I might give them, if you have stand timers, I love stand timers as well. I might flip it over and I might give them 1 minute to find as many AI words as they can, if that's what we're working on, AI or AY. Go through and write them down on your whiteboard, as many as you can. We might choral read. We might echo read the text for our second read. We might partner read. All of those are things that we can do, and we just don't want to just read it once, right? We want to let them have multiple exposures to that text. And so when we think about routines for following up and extending on what we've read, we can then review that vocabulary with them. We can give them a vocabulary activity to do with that. I'm sorry, if you're just coming in, I've got a cold and I'm losing my voice. Ask and answer questions. So we want to talk about building that background knowledge, especially if we're using these nonfiction decodable texts. We're talking about real world things, and kids love talking about real world things. And so following up with questions and having them have conversations and think, pair, share are all really important things that we should do for our students. And then we can't forget, we can always extend it through writing, because here's the magic. If they can read it, they can write it. And so we don't want to always separate reading and writing, right? They kind of come hand in hand. And so I might, with this book about mail, I might give them a prompt that says, tell me about a time that you got mail, that you went to the mailbox and you pulled out a letter. There's that vocabulary we're pulling in, and your name was on it. Or if you could write a letter, how would you do it, right? What's the process you would go through? And so just extend it on through writing, because if they can read it, they can write it. And then you can continue to build fluency. I shared today, actually, on Instagram, my Tuesday tip was all about partner reading. And I think it's so important. This is something, the picture you see here is a first grade teacher that I worked with last year. And she was really struggling to find her rhythm in her whole group routines. And she wasn't sure how to build that fluency. She had kids that were on different levels. And so we spent about 10 weeks in her room. And by the time I left, when I tell you that these kids could read beautifully with each other, I'm not exaggerating. They knew how to give immediate feedback. If I were to go back to that slide and go through those steps of what happens when a kid misses a word and what you as the teacher would do, we have taught the kids to do that when they're partner reading. So if they're reading this passage and they're going to do a retell on the class trip, see how they're both on the same word and they're reading. And so let's say that word until was missed. And let's say this kiddo right here missed the word until. This child is going to reach over, they're going to point to the word until, and they're going to say, the word is until. They might say until. Let's read it together. Until. And then that child's going to point right back here and they're going to read this together. They swim and swim until the trip is done. Okay? It takes time. When I say we spent 10 weeks, but it was so worth it because it was beautiful to walk around and watch them partner reading. Okay. And then, we can do repeated reading. So they might do this 3 times, right? So they get really good at it. And we might also practice reading it together. That passage pulled up, we might do some choral and echo reading it together. Okay, so what does this look like? This is where I want to really get into that scaffolded piece for your students. So I kind of laid out a typical week for you. And I thought I had grabbed my my decodables, and I'm not sure that I did, so I'm going to walk you through it. So when we think about how many kindergarten teachers do I have in here right now? Just kind of let me know in the chat. Kindergarten, maybe first grade. Yeah, kindergarten. I see lots of kindergarten. Okay, so guys, my question to you is, in kindergarten, a decodable text is words in isolation. So when kids are able to just read a word card with those words in isolation, that's a decodable. And so what I want you to see is, you can see how heavy right here Monday is. We've got that phonemic awareness warm up. We've got that 3-part drill. We're introducing that new skill. We might do some word chaining, okay? That's a lot. That's heavy on teaching that new skill. So we might just on Monday say, okay, boys and girls, we've learned this new skill. Let's read some of these words in isolation. Let's read just some word cards. So you might give them each 5 cards with that, whatever that phonics skill is, and have them read them. And that might be their decodable for the day. And then you might do a dictation. And so you can see how this kind of trickles off. What are we doing on Thursday and Friday? We're doing a quick review. We're rereading a text. We're partner reading. We're answering and answering those comprehension questions. We're saving time for that in context time right here, because that's so important. But what I want you to think about is, for those kids who can't just go straight to a text or straight to a passage, you can give them words in isolation. Then we wanted to, a couple years ago, we went straight to sentences, and our kids really struggled going from the word level to the sentence level. So we created these sentence pyramids, and basically, I might have one up here, let me see. Yeah, I have one. So these sentence pyramids, if you guys can see, are just at the top here. So we can dig, we can dig in, and so on. So they're only having to hold on to one new word at a time. And so by the time they get to the bottom, they're able to read the full sentence, right? And so that was a perfect scaffold for those who were going from the word level to the sentence level and we're struggling. So we just pulled in the sentence pyramids. We did those on Tuesday. So kindergarten, your scope and your week might look like Monday, words in isolation, Tuesday, sentence pyramids, Wednesday, sentence strips, right? Having them read sentences, and then maybe Thursday reading sentences again, and then maybe Friday reading maybe a longer text. Or if you're in kindergarten, your book might look like this, right? We talked about these, where they just have that successive blending. So there are lots of scaffolds there. But the thought process here is that we eventually get them to that longer text. I'm going to stop because I need a drink of water. Are there any questions? All right, I'm going to keep going then. Okay, so let's talk about differentiation for our students. So when we're providing this differentiation for them, we have to think about what do they need. If they're struggling within a decodable text, do they need more work at the skill level? If they are struggling, do they need some visual support? And I don't mean, do they need pictures? What I mean is you might have to bring in that, I've got one right here. You might have to bring this in and say, hey, boys and girls, when we're reading, remember, this is what we do. We look all the way through the word. We sound it out. We blend it back together, right? So that might be a visual support. That might be all they need. You can give that to them when they're reading a single word. Give it to them when they're reading a sentence pyramid. You can give it to them when they're reading sentences or a book, right? You might have to scaffold that decodable link. So it might not have to be a decodable book every single day. I see Leslie saying that using decodables for short vowels, but it's hard to keep them on track. Yeah, kindergarten kiddos, I don't know about you guys, but it is really hard to keep my kindergarten kiddos focused this year. Like it is like I get one focused and I turn around and the other one's up out of their seat moving around. It's really hard. So you might have to scaffold the length of what they're doing, right? You might have to, guess what? Bring in things that they're really interested in. I cannot tell you that if I put this in front of a kindergartner, they would be so excited. Number one, they have a book. Number two, it's real pictures, right? And so they're going to be excited about it. And just celebrate those small victories, because even if they're just reading a word, right? That's a success because they've gone from knowing letter sounds, being able to blend and segment, to now what? Now they're reading. And so you have to celebrate those small victories. Okay, I'm going to see if I have any questions here. Whoops, I think I turned my screen off. Hang on. Let me go back. There we go. I see a question. Kelly says, many of my readers have to read out loud and aren't able to whisper. They get flustered when others are reading out loud close to them. She says she resorted to just one reading at a time. Any suggestions? This is an oldie but goodie. I really love the whisper phones. I use them a lot. And it really does. They think it's cool. It's like a novelty. And so it's almost like they teach themselves to whisper because it's really loud in their ear if they're just reading out loud. You could do one at a time. I feel, Kelly, sometimes it's like I feel like they don't get enough reading time with me if I do that. So if you do that and then you do maybe partner reading, maybe you could pull kids over and listen to them read that you didn't get to listen to read. Laura says, glad to hear attention struggles are not just at our school. Yeah, it is rough. Michelle says the same thing. Yeah, Tracy, no concept of whispering either. Give them a whisper phone because I'm talking in this right now and it's almost busting my eardrum. So they'll learn to whisper because they have to whisper because it's too loud. So maybe grab some whisper phones. Okay. Providing differentiation. Remember, you can work more at the skill level if they need that. Maybe they need to do some more phoneme grapheme mapping. Maybe they need to do some more word chaining. Maybe they need more time. If you think about that weekly at a glance I gave you, maybe they need Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday if they're having a hard time with a concept of really working on things like words in isolation, doing some blending drills, focusing on mapping those words through word chaining or word mapping. I really prefer them in book form. Anytime that I can put a book in front of my kids, I do. Which makes it a little hard because you are following that scope and sequence, Leslie. But if you can give them a book, and that's even, I mean, it'd be so easy for me to give them a sheet with words on it, but they want a book, right? And so they think they have a book, right? They're working through it. And it's the excitement for them to hold a book. So anytime I can, I try to give them books. So visual supports, we talked about those decoding strips, right? Provide visual supports to those phonics patterns. If I'm reading AI and AY, I might put it on the board and say, okay, listen, remember, boys and girls, these are the patterns we're looking at. This is what we've been working on. AI says A in the middle. AY says A at the end. And just kind of give them that support. You can scaffold decodable length. You can go from word to phrase to pyramid to sentence. There's actually some research out there to support the phrase reading level for some students, and that it actually builds that fluency piece. So that's a good place to start as well. And then you can go to that book or text. Gradual introduction of those new concepts. So we want to make sure that we're mastering those skills. So that's why we want to make sure that our decodables include that cumulative review piece. And if they don't, make sure that you're including it in your phonics small group. And we're going to talk about small groups next month in a webinar. And we're going to celebrate those small victories. Yes, Emily, I'm going to share the recording. And we want to do regular temperature checks, right? So we want to ensure that our kids are grasping what we are giving them. And so sometimes I will do quick checks. Now, I'm not going to sit down on a Wednesday afternoon in a small group and have kids read words and sentences into text. I might pick one or the other. If I know that Leslie is struggling with short U, I'm going to see what can Leslie do in context, right? If I want to see how fluent Tracy is with short U, I might give her a text. If I just want to say like, hey, you know what, can they even do it at the isolation level? I might do this. So you can do all three, but you absolutely don't have to. You just kind of want to get a quick check on them. So just as a reminder, decodables are like training wheels. I want you guys to tell me in the chat when I say that, after we have kind of talked a lot about it, I want you guys just to tell me one thing that you think of when you see this phrase, decodable texts are like training wheels. Tell me what you think. And sometimes I just need a little break from talking. So support until independent. They're temporary. Yes. A lot of practice. Yes. Yes. They're temporary and only needed while learning. Yep. It makes support temporary. They eventually won't need them, Marnie, and you get to have that celebration, right? I love that, Lori. They give students the support they need to build confidence. And that's what our kids need so badly, right? Like they're putting all this work in. We've talked about how slow and labored it really can feel for them. And it can feel for us, right? When we're sitting and they're decoding word by word by word, it feels really slow and labored for us too. And so that the fact that we can make them feel successful is so, so important. And so I really, when I think about that, I want them to feel successful as well. And if that means that we're giving them sentences or we're giving them words and they're feeling successful, then I'm happy. And we're just kind of gradually working through to that decodable text piece, preparing them for true independent reads, support and practice, beginning steps to independent reading. I love it. I love it. All right, so decodables are a must for beginning readers, but that doesn't mean that they have to be boring. So what I'm going to have for you guys is I'm going to, right after this webinar, I'm going to send out some short vowel decodable texts for you guys, the nonfiction ones. And then these are the ones that my kinder teachers have been using for the past couple months. And if you guys know me, you know that I don't ever share anything unless it's been used and used by real students and real teachers. And so I'm going to share some of these with you guys too. So let me stop sharing real quick so that you guys can see these. I feel like my hair's a mess. Okay. So bears, okay, obviously they're not going to be able to read this, but that's okay, right? This is an exciting title. And so we have them so if you have students who are reading, so you're going to get the short vowels. Let's say they're reading the vet and you open it up. Okay, they're just simple sentences, right? But let's say that you have a group that wants to read the vet and they're not ready for it. So what we did is we took this book. So this cover will look the same, but what's inside are these simple pages. So they'll start with the sounds that they're going to see. So over here, these are the sounds they'll see in the text. They'll have the successive blending. So they'll say d, 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 and then they'll have to turn the page to get that picture. Look at that. Can you imagine? They're going to be so excited. And then they'll read the word, and then they'll read their next page. And so once they read fed, they'll flip it over, and then there will be another picture for them. So they're getting that picture support. It's exciting because it feels like a real book, but you're still forcing them to read the word before you show them the book. So I'm going to share these with you guys. So like I said, I have them for the short vowels that I'm going to give you. And then we just made a bunch of different ones that go. So I think we made like 3 for each short vowel. So there are 3 of these for short E. And we love those. So I'm going to send those your way. All right. You're welcome. Yeah, it just makes me happy to think about them just being excited about reading a book, right? Okay, if you don't have nonfiction decodables and you want them, I have all 8 sets plus all of these for kindergarten, just the successive blending ones, all in a bundle, and they're on sale. I put them on sale today. They're usually $60, so they're over, let's see, the Val Team set has 8, I think. So they're over like 35, I think, books but look at the topics, right? We've got the vet, right? For our little kids, bugs, ships, plants, sloths, sharks, sports, all the things. So there are 40 titles, plus I just added these. So there's 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 30 more. So I added 30 more if you count the Developing Readers series. So those are in there. They are in the Route to Reading membership. Everything I've ever created is in the Route to Reading membership. So Michelle, if you have trouble finding them, just let me know. But if you search Mega Bundle in the membership, it'll pop up and you'll have all of them. It includes the teacher's guide for lesson plan support, vocabulary and comprehension questions. So you get like the teacher's guide here that kind of walks you through everything. You get the book, you get the projectable version for whole group, and then you also get those vocabulary cards. And then you have this piece. Someone was asking about passages. And so you can send this home if you don't want to send your book home, because we print these nice books and we don't want them to not come back. And so what we'll typically do is they get the book for us in class, and then this might be what they get to send home. So they're all in here. This is what they include. So short vowels have inflections plus ES. We talked about that. And S, digraphs, floss, and CK are bundled together with open and closed syllables. Blends and nasals have those inflectional endings. R control, we've added that ER. CVCE and soft C and G. Vowel teams and tricky Y. Diphthongs and TCH and DGE. And then set 8 just kind of reviews all of the skills. Oh, thank you, Angela. Thank you so much. Thanks, Jody. Thanks for being here. Yeah, I'm getting close on time, aren't I? So everything's in there. You've got your projectable version. You have your teacher's guide. You have your homework if you want to send that home. And they're $30. Or you can join the membership. If you're not in the membership, you can join the membership and get everything plus the Decodables. So I will be sending out, if you just want the freebies, totally fine. If you came for just the knowledge, I hope that I gave you some tips and tricks that are helpful for decodable text for your students. And I hope that you found it helpful. I hope my voice didn't irritate you too bad. It's irritating me pretty bad right now. But I hope that you found it helpful. So I'm going to stick around for questions. I'm going to drop the link for the bundle that's 30. And I'm also going to drop the link for Route to Reading, because if you're not in Route to Reading, I hope that you'll join us. It's like $23 a month, and you get access to all of my resources, everything that I've ever created. So I'm going to share both of those with you, and then I'm going to stick around for questions if you have them. Let me drop this link for you. All right, so here is, here's the link for the Decodables. Thank you, Leslie. Oh, thank you so much. So, and then I'm going to drop the link for the membership too, because the membership's actually cheaper than the books and you get so much more. So I'll drop that for you too, and then I'm going to answer questions. All right, so I dropped 2 links. I dropped the membership link and then I dropped the Decodable link, and I see some questions. So I'm gonna send you some of the K ones, Marnie, and then the other ones, yes. All right. What is your thought about Dibbles? So Patty, what grade do you teach? Remind me. Oh, thank you, Michelle. Are you still there, Patty? I know there's a little bit of a lag, so I'll give you a second. Remind me what grade you teach. Literacy intervention, and just remind me what skills. So you're doing letter name fluency, letter sound fluency for kindergarten. And what else, Patty? Oh, thank you, Christy. Thanks. Yeah, I feel like my voice is going. So when you're thinking Dibbles testing, are you thinking like the information that you guys get from that, Laura? I'm not super familiar with ORF. Okay, so oral reading fluency and first. This is what when we just had a discussion about this. When you're looking at oral reading fluency, what is that an indication of? It lets you know whether your students are reading based on those norms, those correct words per minute. If they are, then what do they need, right? You might still have to do a diagnostic on them to kind of figure out what they need. So you're going to kind of go in 2 different ways. I always like to think of this as kind of like your roadmap. So here's your oral reading fluency. You're either going to put them in that vocabulary comp group because they're reading fluently on grade level. They have the phonics skills. Maybe they don't have all the phonics skills, but when you're looking at what they do have, if they're going to be getting those phonics skills in whole group instruction, then you don't have to spend time in small group instruction doing that for them. You can focus on things like fluency, vocabulary, comprehension. If they don't meet that criteria on the oral reading fluency, Patty, then you're going to have to give them some sort of a diagnostic. I love the letters diagnostic where you have them kind of decode. It starts at like letter names, letter sounds, and then it gives you like nonsense words, CVC, goes all the way through. So they have to read that. And then I also love giving the diagnostic, the spelling diagnostic, because if they're not meeting where they need to be on oral reading fluency, then you're going to have to figure out what is it that they need. And so if they're not fluent, that means there's something, probably a struggle there with decoding, maybe a phonemic awareness issue. And so you're going to want to kind of look there. Does that help, Patty? I know Laura had a question about Dibbles as well. Sorry, I know there's a little bit of a lag, so we're waiting on Patty and Laura to answer. If there are any other questions, I'll be happy to answer those for you. Okay. Oh, thank you, Diana. Thank you, thank you. Okay, Patty, I'm sorry, it's coming through now. It just says that, she says it's hard for kids if they aren't reading sight words. It's harder sight words. Yeah, and here's my thing when it comes to sight words. If I'm teaching kindergarten or first grade, I'm going to teach them those first 10 to 12, kind of that old-fashioned way. because they kind of have to have that bank. And then I'm going to revisit those and teach them to map them when we get into that scope and sequence, if that makes sense. So I wouldn't put a lot of, when it comes to that, if you know that you're working with them in small group and you're going to be working on a phonics skill with them and you kind of set that roadmap up for them, I wouldn't put a lot of, I don't want to say I wouldn't look at the assessment, but I would really be thinking about, Patty, if it were me, if they don't have the sight words, I know I'm building that in with my phonics scope and sequence. I know that I'm building that in as part of my explicit teaching piece. And so then you need to kind of shift your focus with, okay, they're not there fluency wise. So I have to focus on what I need to focus on, which is that word piece, that word mapping piece, that phoneme grapheme correspondence, so that they can become fluent. And so you do that through those decodables. You're working on that skill, and then you're adding that context. And so you can build that fluency through partner reading, and all the things that we talked about tonight. Yes, so my scope and sequence, it has, what we did is we laid out our phonics skills. And can you guys hear me still? Okay. Yeah, Patty, so it does lay it out. So for example, the word they is going to fall under that digraph TH, if that makes sense. Yeah. Yes, the nonfiction decodables are in the resource hub. It is super hard to get them to track. It is, Leslie. I would start here with them, and then I would kind of go here. And so if you're having a hard time getting them to track, I would start at the sentence pyramid level or the sentence pyramid, and I would choral read with them until they get that tracking down. Yes. All right. Are there any other questions? Thank you guys for being with me. I'm going to drop the links one more time so that you have them. I'm going to send out your freebie in the email too, and I'll send those links again. Yeah, Marnie, I didn't put the KSAT up yet. It is in the bundle, and I can definitely put that out just as a single product as well. If you email me when I do that, I'll email the link to you. Marnie, are you in the membership? Okay. Your name was familiar to me, so I just wanted to make sure you weren't buying anything if you were in the membership. Okay, and I'll drop the link one more time for the Nagel. Okay, got it. All right, thank you guys so much. Thanks for being here. I'm going to send the recording out as well, and I'll send your freebies out here in just a few minutes. Thank you, Amy. Thanks, guys. See you later. Thanks for being here. Patty and Laura, if you have more Dibbles questions, just email me. I can help you look at that data. Thanks, guys.